Hasina out, Bangladesh in chaos. Loot, anarchy and flames of violence. Fueled by ISI China op regime change. Sinister Maldives-style India out campaign. Plotted in London and executed in Dhaka. Here's the inside story of the Oust Hasina plot.
There are reports of violence and arson across Bangladesh. When the house of the Prime Minister of Bangladesh wasn't safe from the so-called revolutionaries who've turned into looters in under 24 hours, you can imagine what the situation would be on ground. Awami League leaders have been targeted, their homes torched, individuals targeted, but it's not just the ruling party leadership. Hindus are in the line of fire in Bangladesh. Hindu temples, Hindu shops, Hindu businesses, they've been targeted, and several are now trying to flee to India, seeking shelter in India. Before I get you more on this big story, let's start with the day's top developments.
Unrest and violence in Bangladesh. A day after Sheikh Hasina quit as the Prime Minister and fled the country, protests are only escalating. Over 100 have died in violence across Bangladesh after Hasina's ouster. Angry protesters took down Mujibur Rahman's statue and formed the streets of Dhaka. Former Bangladesh cricket team captain Mashrafe Murtaza's home was torched by protesters. Protesters also stormed into Dhaka police headquarters. In a video, police could be heard declaring they will not work anymore. Attacks on minorities is on the rise. ISKCON temple in Meherpur was vandalized and set on fire. Deities of Lord Jagannath, Balbhadra and Subhadra Devi were burnt.
500 से 1000 आदमी आया तो हमारा इधर से घुसकर सब कुछ तोड़-फोड़ किया। साथ से उन लोग हमारा मंदिर पे अग्नि संयोग किया और गन पाउडर और इधर बोमा भी हमको निक्षेप किया। आप देख सकते हैं ये सारी सब कुछ तोड़-फोड़ किया। ये जो हमारा जो मंदिर का जो सीलिंग वो भी टूट गया बम निक्षेप करने के बाद।
Hindu houses and business establishments were targeted by mobs in several districts.
हमला का बहुत संभावना है और सब भक्त लोग और हिंदू जनगोष्ठी पहरा दे रहा है। चिटागंग में 3 टेम्पल में अटैक के लिए चाहिए और थोड़ा अटैक किया और हिंदू जनगोष्ठी और कुछ मुस्लिम पीपल सहायता किया।
Meanwhile, Sheikh Hasina remains in India. The Bangladesh Air Force plane that brought her to India has returned. Security has been tightened at the Hindon airbase near Delhi, where Hasina is right now. VIP cars were spotted entering and leaving the base. BSF DG Diljit Chaudhary visited all India-Bangladesh border to take stock of the situation. External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar briefed Parliament on the ground situation in Bangladesh.
Since the election in January 2024, there has been considerable tension. This underlying foundation aggravated a student agitation that started in June this year. There was growing violence, including attacks on public buildings and infrastructure. The violence continued through the month of July. Throughout this period, we repeatedly counseled restraint and urged that the situation be diffused through dialogue.
There is no clarity on Sheikh Hasina's next move. the former Prime Minister's asylum is still in the works. With Suryagni Roy, Shivangi, Ashutosh and Piyush Mishra, Bureau Report, India Today.
Hindu temples, homes and businesses are in the line of fire in Bangladesh. Several temples have been set ablaze, vandalized and looted. Violence against Hindus has been reported in Bangladeshi newspapers, in one newspaper, across 27 districts in the country after the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. The situation is so precarious, India was forced to take notice. External Affairs Minister Dr. S Jaishankar informed the House about New Delhi's concerns. Hindu women say they feel extremely vulnerable. Some that India Today spoke of seeking shelter in India. Suryagni Roy brings us this report. Idols of Bhagwan Jagannath, Balbhadra and Devi Subhadra on the floor of a burnt temple in Bangladesh. Hindu community members rushed to the temple after it was vandalized, looted and set on fire by a mob marching to Dhaka in the name of a revolution to oust then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina.
कल शाम पे लगभग 5:30 से 5:30 बजे में जो मसली है जो लगभग 500 से 1000 आदमी आया तो हमारा इधर से घुसकर सब कुछ तोड़-फोड़ किया। साथ से उन लोग हमारा मंदिर पे अग्नि संयोग किया और गन पाउडर और इधर बोमा भी हमको निक्षेप किया। आप देख सकते हैं ये सारे सब कुछ तोड़-फोड़ किया।
But these images are only symbolic of a wider, systematic targeting of minority Hindus in Bangladesh since the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. The Daily Star in Bangladesh reported the targeting, loot, plunder, arson and violence against Hindus in 27 districts across the country. So bad has been the situation in Bangladesh that External Affairs Minister Dr. S Jaishankar informed both houses of parliament about India's concerns about this targeting of Hindu businesses and temples.
What was particularly worrying was that minorities, their businesses and temples also came under attack at multiple locations. Naturally remain deeply concerned till law and order is visibly restored.
Local minority Hindus are living in fear. There have been reports of a mob of 200 to 300 armed people arriving in localities, singling out homes, businesses and temples of Hindus and targeting them. A priest at the ISKCON temple in Bangladesh told India Today that they'd reached out both to the Bangladesh police and the Rapid Action Battalion, but no help came their way.
Police, Rapid Action Battalion, others had no help. Help के लिए अपारगता किया.
In fact, Hindu women live in fear, with some saying they may seek refuge in India unless there is a crackdown on radical Islamist elements in Bangladesh. India Today caught up with a Hindu woman at the India-Bangladesh border, living in fear in Bangladesh since the ouster of the Sheikh Hasina government.
मारा मारी घर दुआर भांगा भांगी मेये गरे हाथ धरे निये टेने टेने निये चले जाচ্ছে
চান যে ভারতে চলে আসতে
হ্যাঁ যদি আমাকে সেরকম আসতে পারতাম তাহলে তো আমরা চলে আসতাম আমরা এইরকম হুমকির মুখে থাকতে যাচ্ছি বিজেপি কখনো কোন একটা
The targeting of Hindu businesses, homes and temples was raised even by political leaders in Bengal, with leader of opposition Suvendu Adhikari saying India must prepare to give refuge to 1 crore Hindus living in fear in Bangladesh.
1 কোটি শরণার্থী পশ্চিমবঙ্গে আসবে বাংলাদেশে হিন্দু কোতল চলছে পশ্চিমবঙ্গের মুখ্যমন্ত্রী রাজ্যপালকে বলবো বিলম্বে ভারত সরকারের সঙ্গে কথা বলুন 1 কোটির বেশি হিন্দু শরণার্থীকে নেওয়ার জন্য সবাই মানসিক প্রস্তুতি নেন
Radical Islamists are believed to have targeted the Indira Gandhi Cultural Center in Dhaka, run by the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, Government of India. A social media campaign being triggered for India out in Bangladesh for several months is also gaining ground, indicating a sustained effort to target Hindus and India in Bangladesh by hostile elements. With Suryagni Roy at the India-Bangladesh border, Bureau Report, India Today. And joining me now from Bangladesh on this India Today special broadcast is Charu Chandra Brahmachari, the General Secretary of ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, who joins us from Bangladesh. Sir, what's the situation right now in Bangladesh after Sheikh Hasina's ouster? Are Hindus still being attacked in Bangladesh?
Current situation is very bad. Anytime can attack our Hindu temple, also Hindu house, also Hindu shop, Hindu leaders house, Hindu leaders business place. Anytime can attack. We are afraid.
What can you tell us about the attacks that have taken place so far on temples or businesses or homes? What more can you tell us in terms of where and how these attacks took place, sir?
Yeah, this is a Hindu community in Meherpur. This is not so many Hindu community there. That our small center in Meherpur. They attacked our temple and then caught fire and then burned out everything there.
And is there any information about who are these people who are targeting Hindus? Because some seem to indicate that these are random attacks. There are attacks that are taking place on Muslims who are close to Sheikh Hasina or her party, and there are attacks taking place on others as the so-called revolutionaries march towards Dhaka or take control of these areas. Who are these people who are attacking the Hindus? Do you have any information?
Actually, some Maulavadi and then against Hindu. There is some fanatic Muslims and fanatic like Jamaat Islam and others, and our Muslim. Some against our Hindu, and there's some fanatic Muslim. They are attacked.
Okay, so you're saying that these are Islamist fanatics who are attacking Hindus in Bangladesh. Have you reached out to anybody in the administration, either the army or the Bangladesh Rapid Response Battalions or the police? Because we are told that the police itself is in the line of fire of these revolutionaries and Islamists who are trying to ride piggyback. But what can you tell us about the response of the administration? And there are some reports that seem to indicate that some of the Hindus want to return to India till the situation normalizes, till it stabilizes. What can you tell me about that, sir?
No, Hindu is not safe in Bangladesh. But Hindu is not. This situation is not only one time. So many times this situation. And then always some attack in government chains and attack Hindus' house, Hindu shops, Hindus' guard, and so many times attacked, and then Hindu leave Bangladesh, and Hindu day by day Hindu decrease in Bangladesh.
True. What are your expectations? What do you want from the administration? Any expectation from India or from Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
I want to tell Prime Minister Narendra Modi, please help us, help Bangladeshi Hindus, and because any government form in Bangladesh, this is that government is like India, have to like India, because India help. Without help, Bangladesh government cannot set. Then I think if Narendra Modi will tell our government, any government, then they will hurt and they will government will save us. I think.
Charu Chandra Das Brahmachari ji for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks. Pray to God you and others stay safe in Bangladesh. The Islami Chhatra Shibir, ICS, or the student wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami in Bangladesh, has emerged as one of the key architects of the student protest and subsequent chaos, violence and arson in Bangladesh, according to sources that India Today has spoken to. Now, this student organization is believed to be quite radical in its approach. It's believed to have the backing of Pakistan's ISI and other bodies that wanted Sheikh Hasina out of power in Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina had to resign as Prime Minister on Monday after the army actually gave her literally 45 minutes to step down and leave the country. Our next report tells you more about how there was a plan that was orchestrated, a plan to oust Sheikh Hasina, a plan for a regime change in Bangladesh.
Months of violence and protest across Bangladesh ultimately ended Sheikh Hasina's 15-year rule. But was it an organic uprising, or is there more to the Bangladesh crisis than meets the eye? Intelligence sources say the blueprint of Operation Regime Change was drafted in London in collaboration with Pakistan, ISI and China. Bangladeshi officials claim to have evidence of meetings between the acting chief Bangladeshi Nationalist Party, Tariq Rahman, and ISI officials in Saudi Arabia. Son of Khalida Zia also allegedly met ISI operatives. Intel sources also point to China and Pakistan ISI hand in fanning the protest that forced Sheikh Hasina to flee. Islami Chhatra Shibir, the student wing of hardline Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh, which is known for its anti-India stance, turned the protest over quotas into a determined effort to replace Hasina with a regime that is friendly to Pakistan and China. The intelligence input indicate meticulous planning by ICS members several months before, aimed at instigating widespread violence across the nation. According to Intel sources, significant portion of this funding is believed to have originated from Chinese entities operating in Pakistan. Islami Chhatra Shibir has massive presence in Dhaka and Chittagong universities, and its cadres incited and brainwashed students.
Even on the social media platforms, anti-Bangladesh handles were fueling protests. Videos of violence against protesters and posters demonizing Sheikh Hasina were being manufactured by Bangladesh Nationalist Party and its affiliated accounts like Student Wing and Media Cell. A large chunk of these were being handled and amplified by US-based handles, and 500 anti-Sheikh Hasina government tweets were made, including those which were being done from Pakistani handles.
India Today's OSINT team has also found evidence of the role of Bangladesh's main opposition party in an anti-India campaign that mimics the Maldives, India Out. An in-depth analysis of more than 4,000 tweets show hashtag boycott Indian products, along with some other low-volume hashtags like hashtag India Out and hashtag boycott India, started gaining traction on social media platforms in Bangladesh a week after Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina took oath following controversial elections boycotted by opposition parties. Many accounts actively pushing the hashtags also posted objectionable and derogatory tweets against India, Hindus and Hinduism, and were found celebrating terrorist acts and the Taliban rule in Afghanistan. Bureau Report, India Today.
So was this an organic student uprising or a very well-crafted regime change operation where social media and big tech played a critical role? Were Islamists riding piggyback on the student unrest, and did organizations infiltrate the student unrest and foment it? Joining me now for more on this big story is Sushant Sareen. He's a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Ambassador Shamsher Mubin Chaudhry is former Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, and Lieutenant General Tiny Dillon, Lieutenant General KJS Dillon is former Chief of the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Deputy Chief of Integrated Defense Staff, joins me on this broadcast. But Sushant Sareen, I want to come to you first. An organic student unrest that gained traction in Bangladesh, or a very well-crafted regime change operation?
Look, I think it was a combination of both. So, for example, you've had the students who were agitating, but things had been building up in Bangladesh over many months. And clearly something was going to give way. And this, in a sense, the students' movement became a trigger. But I would probably go along with the rest of your report that there have been elements of social media, how NGOs and others have played a role, how foreign governments have probably played a role. And I think some of the countries everybody seems to be targeting in India, they're not exactly India's favorites, are probably going to benefit from what has happened. But were they behind what has happened? I have my doubts on it. I will wait for some more time before I can say with some degree of certainty. What we know certainly is that there were countries in the West, for example, which had been pushing the Sheikh Hasina government against the wall. Okay. They have been imposing sanctions on her and her ministers and members of her government on issues of democracy and the strangulation of democracy, even though the same United States and some of the other Western countries cannot see, they become completely like Mahatma Gandhi's three monkeys. They don't see any evil, they don't say any evil, and they don't hear any evil when it comes to Pakistan, where democracy has been killed, where opposition leaders have been jailed, where opposition parties have been put in prison. All kinds of things have happened. You've not heard a peep from the Americans on that, have you? So
you're talking about the American double standards, American regime change operations, and America is notorious for this almost across the globe. But this was an organic movement that they capitalized on. But as someone who's inside Bangladesh, somebody who's donned the uniform at one point of time and has been Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, how do you view this? Did the BNP or the Islamic Chhatra Shivir and the Jamaat-e-Islami ride that popular unrest?
You are totally underestimating the emotions of the new generation in Bangladesh. Branding every anti-Hasina, anti-Awami League person as an ISI or a Jamaat agent only exposes your ignorance about our country.
27 districts were Hindu temples and homes targeted. Were Hindus targeted in Bangladesh? Were these protesters? Were these revolutionaries, or were they jihadis? General KJS Dillon, that's a cause for grave concern right now, the way Hindus are being targeted.
Yeah, I think the ambassador is quite right. It was the pogroms against the Hindus have been happening even under the Sheikh Hasina government. The only thing was that, at least on the face of it, Sheikh Hasina's government pretended to be secular and, secularize the constitution. But on the ground, that didn't really work. And look, if you look at just the percentages of Hindus in Bangladesh, the real ethnic cleansing of Hindus has taken place in Bangladesh. It's not taken place so much in Pakistan, because much of what had to happen in Pakistan happened in 47. In Bangladesh, till as late as the 1970s, it was about 22-24%. Since then, it's come down to what, less than 10%. I think it's 8.5% Hindu population. Where have these people gone? It cannot be that they've been outnumbered by the growth in Muslim population. They have been pushed out of Bangladesh. We know that. If somebody wants to deny it, you can deny it. So there is a major communal problem in Bangladesh. There has been a kind of, for the want of a better word, a genocide of Hindus in Bangladesh. And what happened yesterday will only enhance the insecurity of the Hindu community, because there has been no let or hindrance. Now, you can put 5, 10, 20 people out of 15 places and plaster those photographs on social media and on mainstream media and say that, look, people are coming out to protect these guys. But many of these mullahs and maulvis have been also responsible for these pogroms. And to deny that this kind of stuff is happening, I don't think it's going to serve any purpose except for propaganda purpose. because the reality is in front of everybody. And we can hear the screams, we can see people appealing, directly and indirectly to be evacuated from places, to be safe.
Yes.
Why else the Bangladesh army, for example, give numbers of military officers who need to be contacted if people are in trouble? But the people claim, the Hindus claim, that when we try and get in touch with these people, nobody is responding to our calls. So clearly there's been a complete breakdown of law and order. Yes, maybe in a few places some good Samaritans have stood together to protect the minorities. But by and large, the minorities are extremely insecure in Bangladesh. Anybody wants to deny that reality, they're free to do it. But I'm afraid I can't accept it.
And the world sees, Ambassador Chaudhary, what's happening on ground, whether you look at it as a fluid situation or something that's been happening in a sustained manner. The apprehension is that will this intensify in the days, weeks and months ahead? What is your reading of the situation, sir?
I'm confident. I'm absolutely confident. I know my country better than you do. I know my society better than you do. I know my people better than you do. I'm confident this is a temporary phenomena. And as I've said, that certainly I don't want to see anybody suffering from a sense of insecurity. I spoke to the former health minister, who's a Hindu himself. He was feeling very secure. He was feeling very confident. He's moving around. Nobody's even bothering him. In my village, in my district, not a single temple has been even attacked, let alone attacked, have been even approached by anybody.
Okay.
Not one thing. And some of the biggest temples are in Sylhet. Some of the oldest temples are in Sylhet. And we have all gone to their pujas. We celebrated with them. They come and celebrate Eid with us. We don't go on hunting and killing people who do business with cows. We don't lynch people, cow merchants in Bangladesh.
Well, apparently there have been some lynchings in Bangladesh, including of Awami League leaders, allegedly by the revolutionaries in the past 24 hours. You can tell me if those reports are true or false.
You forget that
sir, I forget nothing,
sir. Killed by Awami League thugs. You forget that 300 people have been killed by Awami League thugs and by the police. A young boy delivering water to the protesters have been killed, shot. A young student stood in front of the police with his hands out. He said, okay, I believe in justice in this country. You want to kill me, kill me.
And that justifies lynching in your view, sir? Fair enough.
But no action was taken against the policeman until yesterday. The government denied this incident. It was live on television. Maybe it was not on your television. It was live
on every television. It was live on every television, sir, without fear or favor. We show facts. We show facts without fear or favor. At the same time, we don't believe in selective cover-up either. And we don't believe in giving cover fire to radical Islamists if they're hoping to return to power, riding piggyback on a social movement. But let me bring in General Tiny Dhillon for another perspective on the story, Ambassador. Stay with me for a moment. Let me bring in General KJS Dhillon. He's former Chief of Defense Intelligence. General Dhillon, there are reports that seem to indicate that yes, there was student unrest, yes, there was anger, but this is where the Islamic Chhatra Shivir, their cadres, they infiltrated universities, they fomented the trouble, digital media, big tech was used from TikTok to X to Snapchat to foment the trouble. And the plot that was hatched in the United Kingdom with ISI, and of course, Ambassador Mubin Chaudhary may not like it, but BNP allegedly involved in it. What is your reading of these reports, sir?
Thank you, Gaurav. See, this type of large-scale protests cannot be raised and sustained. They cannot be sustained the way these protests in Bangladesh have been sustained over the last few months. It's difficult to sustain an organic protest like this without funding, without any motivation, without any radicalization, without infiltration by the people who are going to benefit from this. So without getting into the names and other things, there are powers or there are forces who are going to benefit from Ms. Sheikh Hasina being ousted. And those can be counted where the time passes, as Mr. Sreen has very rightly said. As the time passes, those people will get exposed. So as of now, the student unrest, to just call it a pure students' unrest, I think let's not fool ourselves. They have been infiltrated by the radicals, by the Jamaat-e-Islami, by the ISI, and ISI presence is very much there in Bangladesh. No one can deny it. I am very sure Ambassador Chaudhary knows about it. Although, he has fought the liberation war, and that's one good thing about, Bangladesh people. They all have seen the liberation war. They all have seen the miseries brought to them by the West Pakistan. But it was disheartening to see the statue of Mr. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Bangabandhu, being brought down in such a dastardly manner. The person who gave freedom to Bangladesh, and if this is the payback, I think Bangladesh is headed for very difficult times.
Ambassador, would you want to respond to this? The manner in which Bangabandhu's statues, and not one but multiple, have been brought down, some desecrated by, you may not want to call them revolutionaries, but perhaps they see themselves as revolutionaries, including one who was easing himself on Bangabandhu's statue?
I certainly condemn that kind of an activity. I think Bangabandhu should be above any controversy, should be above any identity. I certainly don't support this kind of vandalism, bringing down the statues of anybody. At the same time, I don't support creating, deifying a political leader. Bangabandhu was undoubtedly a leader who inspired a whole lot of people during our liberation war. And I have written, what you are missing the point, that the student unrest, which started with the quota, gathered momentum in the society. Forget the ISI, forget the Islamists, forget the Islamists. It is families, young boys, who went out and provided them water and food because they were fighting for justice. They're fighting a hugely unpopular government. You forget the fact that only an unpopular government autocrat will run away from the country. A popular leadership will never run away from the country. Mr. Marcos had to run away, flee from his country. Shah of Iran had to flee from his country. Suharto in Indonesia had to flee from his country. The only unpopular dictators and autocrats have flee from their countries, not popular ones.
You forgot,
so
fair enough. You missed out on several in Pakistan, but be that as it may, Nawaz Sharif had to flee his country, Pervez Musharraf had to flee his country.
To me, Pakistan is a country that makes less and less of sense. So I don't even want to downgrade myself by talking about Pakistan. It's a society that doesn't make sense anymore. So I don't want to even talk about Pakistan. It is so bad.
There I completely agree with you, but I want to bring in Sushant Sareen into this conversation once again, because Sushant Sareen, yes, there was popular unrest and there is no denying that fact, but did the Supreme Court and did the courts in Bangladesh not address that issue of quota, but the fire kept increasing? And was it organic, that fire that kept increasing, or this is where there were powers that played into popular discontent and unrest in Bangladesh?
Yeah, Gaurav, look, the way I look at it is that, there was pressure in the system. And because all democratic avenues for expressing dissent or protest were basically blocked, it had to burst somewhere. And what it needed was a trigger. Now, that quota thing was a trigger. It brought the students out on the streets. On the back of the students, other people jumped in. It could not be, because a lot of the protesters which we saw could not have been students. The students might have spearheaded it initially, but by the time the Supreme Court stepped in and the government tried to, reverse what the High Court had passed, I think it was a case of too little too late, because by then that entire movement had morphed into something more than just quotas. It was no longer about just the quotas. And it was, all that other baggage which had started coming in, of a government which was there by force. And see, part of the problem is when you close all avenues of dissent and of protest and what have you, then, you're living in a kind of an echo chamber, Gaurav. And what happens is that you lose your pulse of the people, you lose, that ear to the ground that politicians are supposed to have. And you are surrounded by a coterie which is feeding you all kinds of nonsense and extolling your virtues, and often non-existent virtues. So you are living in a world of, make-believe, and you think everything is hunky-dory when clearly it is not. There is a lot of bubbling which is happening. Now, what happens is that there were other players, political parties and other players and some very despicable elements which also bandwagoned on this whole thing. And obviously, they would hijack the protest. They would indulge in a lot of pillage. They will indulge in plunder. And, then this whole thing starts getting a life of its own. We've seen it not just in Bangladesh. We've seen it in many other places. The question now, and the critical question is, what will happen from here on?
Yes.
Will there be some kind of order which will be restored? Will it be acceptable interim government? What's the roadmap for the future? Will the next government, if at all there is some kind of a government, whether it's army, whether it's not army, what kind of policies will it adopt?
Let me take that to Ambassador. Let me take that to Ambassador Chaudhary. Ambassador Chaudhary, do you see this moment as, what was then the Arab Spring? Now, is this some kind of a Bangla Spring in your view? And what next? Is it this interim government? Can you tell us more about the efforts to form one?
Well, you see, I have been in touch with the leadership, the student leadership of the protests. Very sane, very new generation people. Not totally, they don't even know Pakistan, forget about it. They don't understand Pakistan. Even Pakistanis don't understand Pakistan. So how can our people understand Pakistan? They are saying that a short-term interim government is not necessary solution. Having an election straight away is also not a solution. We need to bring some fundamental changes in our governance system where one autocrat does not replace another autocrat.
Okay.
One bunch of corrupt leadership is not replaced by another bunch of corrupt leadership. The BNP is certainly not a clean political party when it comes to corruption. Of course, Hasina overdid everybody else. The fact remains they are talking of a big fundamental change in the structural system. And I have talked to them. I have said, look at the Indian model. First of all, the Indian voters have trust in their electoral process. The Bangladeshi voters have zero trust in the electoral process because of the machination that takes place. Number two, we were 300 members of parliament in 1971 when we had a population of 75 million. Today we have 170 million population, and the numbers of members of parliament are still 300, which is vaguely distorted. Number three, India has bicameral legislature. Why can't Bangladesh have a bicameral legislature? Even Nepal has a bicameral legislature. Even Sri Lanka. Then I talked to you, we should also look at the Indian federal system, which is a role model, if you ask me. It works so well. Why, if Sri Lanka can have provincial governments with a population of 25 million, the size of the country is half of Bangladesh, why can't Bangladesh have provincial governments?
But all of this will take a long time. So does that mean by the time these solutions are found, that interim government or the army stays in, so General Waqar Zaman stays in power?
Gaurav, the interim administration, whatever it is, should have a long life period, at least a year, and through ordinances by the president, these changes can be incorporated into the constitution and then passed into law in the parliament. Our constitution allows that. See, these fundamental changes are necessary, absolutely necessary. And unless you bring you replace one bad apple with another bad apple. We don't want that I don't want that.
So you're saying that Begum Khalida Zia or BNP leaders will not be in power. Is that what you're indicating?
You see, if you have proportional representation in the election, like in Sri Lanka, like in Germany, not first past the post system. In India, you can afford to have the first past the post system because your electoral process works. In our system, electoral process doesn't work. So we have to have the system of non-party caretaker government that we had in the past, which the Awami League threw away for their own benefit. It was a very popular system. Everybody accepted it. Every election under the non-party caretaker system led to a new government being elected. The anti-incumbency played a major role. So we should go back. We should look at those things. I have been talking of the bicameral legislature as in India. I'm talking about federal system of government like in India.
Let me take this to General Dhillon also. General Dhillon, while all of this is being worked out, do we then get to understand that it will be General Waqar Zaman and a team that he puts together, that the army would be in charge in Bangladesh, and the apprehension that many have in India? Because Ambassador Chaudhary says, don't look for an ISI agent behind every bush. Is that practical in terms of given the ground realities in Bangladesh?
See, what needs to be done immediately is stop the violence, stop the bloodbath. First, the killings, as I saw on your channel only, 100 people have already been killed or died in protests, even after Ms. Sheikh Hasina has left the country.
Yes.
Now, this needs to stop. Innocent lives must not be lost anymore. Now, what type of a government, what type of an interim government, what type of a temporary government, or changeover, or when they want to have the elections, that is an internal matter of the Bangladesh per se. But what we need to do is the very important question which you asked: what from here? Now, from here, Bangladesh has to understand Bangladesh has got India on three sides, Bay of Bengal on one side, and Myanmar partially. Bangladesh must mend fences with India, must have very cordial relations with India. India as a big brother and wanting a stable neighborhood would assist Bangladesh in reconstructing and re-establishing democracy. The actual democracy. I'm not getting carried away by what Ambassador Chaudhary is saying or what others are saying or what others are not saying. I go by what the elections results show of a particular country. Okay. We need to have stable government, stable democracy in our neighborhood, which is in mutual interest of both the countries. The transition from what mayhem is going on today to a stability in Bangladesh has to be worked out by the Bangladesh people in conjunction with their military, their political parties, their thinkers, all the people the opinion makers, what is best interest of the country. As an Indian
since you mentioned,
India as a country, we need a stable neighborhood.
Yeah, appreciate that point, sir. But since you mentioned that India can help, India can only help if Bangladesh needs or seeks India's help. But if Bangladesh or the new dispensation in Bangladesh does not want India's help, Ambassador Chaudhary, would that, in your appreciation, lead to a freeze? And what would that mean for, and Sushant Sari, in a moment on that, what does that mean for India's Act East? What does it mean for our connectivity and our trade? But Ambassador Chaudhary, your take on where does Bangladesh see India now, especially if Sheikh Hasina is still in India?
Well, I think India should engage the government, the new dispensation in Bangladesh, which is there. It is in India's interest, it is in our interest. And we should work together. I have deep relations with friends in India. I did a number of meetings with CLAUSE. General Dillon would know what CLAUSE stands for.
Yes.
I'm a regular visitor to CLAUSE events. I'm a regular visitor to Indian MEA. I'm a regular visitor to Indian think tanks. I work with them. I write for them. I do projects with them. I do no projects in Pakistan. I don't know projects in China. I only do my projects either in Bangladesh or in India. So when I say something, you should take it as a construct. Maybe I'll come harsh when my country is attacked on the television channel, but I'm a patriot as much as I find everything working with India is in our interest. So we should work. I was in Delhi just when the crisis was breaking out. I left Delhi on the 23rd of June. I was meeting retired diplomats. I was meeting some retired military personnel. I was having long meeting in the MEA. I had a long meeting in India Foundation. I had long meeting with Mr. Pankaj Saran, who was your High Commissioner here. He is now NATSTRAT, and I contribute to his places. So India and Bangladesh are not, the people say interlocked. Bangladesh is locked in by India and part of India is locked in by Bangladesh. I said Bangladesh and India are interlocked by history and geography. So we should look at that. We can look at the positive, not look at the glass as half empty.
Completely appreciate all the points, because India actually looks at Bangladesh as a very dear neighbor and friend with very close ties. Bangladesh's birth, India played a very critical role, shed blood for Bangladesh. But I want to bring in Sushant Sareen for the last 30 seconds that I have on this part of the show. Sushant Sareen, how do you see all the projects that India is hoping to take forward with Bangladesh, especially issues of connectivity and trade?
So, Gaurav, just a couple of very quick points. Number one, I'm very concerned by what Ambassador Chaudhary, the roadmap he's presented, because frankly, I don't know who's going to decide this roadmap, who's going to decide these things which he has said. Is it going to be top down or is it going to be bottom up? Will it have the consensus of the people or will it be imposed on the people first? Secondly, I think people need to understand any system is only as good as the people make it out to be.